The first time you hold an old VHS tape in your hand, you notice how heavy it feels compared to a modern piece of plastic. The black casing has a texture that almost feels like skin left too long in the sun. Rough, brittle, and yet somehow alive. Beneath your fingers. That's the unsettling part. Unlike digital files, where a movie is just numbers, this thing contains physical, magnetic memory. It dies weight, and the longer you stare at it, the more you feel that weight pressing down on your chest. Imagine this. You're in an abandoned house. You find a box of tapes, none of them labeled, just dusty black rectangles with their spools visible through tiny windows. They're coiled with strips of darkness, like veins looping over and over, as if hiding a secret pulse. This is the beginning of analog horror, explained. Why old VHS tapes are so terrifying. It's not just nostalgia, not just static, but the realization that every second of magnetic tape is a physical scar carved into plastic. The tape remembers, and sometimes what it remembers isn't human. That's the terror of discovery. You press play, and for the first 5 seconds, it's normal. A family recording a child's birthday. A candle burning bright, but then the picture buckles. The child's face warps. The candle bends sideways, and a whisper slips out of the speakers that doesn't belong to anyone in the room. What you see doesn't just look wrong, it feels like a trap set decades ago, waiting for you. Specifically you, to stumble across it. The deeper you press into the logic of VHS horror, the more you realize that the decay of tape itself becomes the monster. Analog horror thrives on glitches, warped colors, distorted tracking, faces stretched too long, voices slowed into a growl. These imperfections are universal. They happen to every tape, everywhere. Which means the terror is shared by anyone who has ever pressed play on an old machine. Analog horror explained. Why old VHS tapes are so terrifying is not only about atmosphere, but about the unknown hidden in those flaws. Because when the tape stutters, when the screen jerks, your mind fills in the gaps with something darker. A blurred shape in the corner becomes a stranger. A static burst becomes a scream. A warped shadow on the wall becomes something alive. And it only gets worse when you remember that VHS is fragile. A single scratch, a single loop of tangled tape, and you don't just see a glitch, you see an entire second of memory destroyed, replaced by noise. It's horrifying because it mirrors us. Our own memories, scratched and warped, lose faces, lose voices, until what remains is only static. That's why old tapes unnerve you more than any polished streaming horror. They're not complete. They're broken, and broken things, especially broken memories, feel haunted. But here's where it twists into something darker. You see, VHS isn't just an object. It's a messenger. People recorded their lives onto these fragile spools. Birthdays, weddings, funerals, news broadcasts. And when you find an unlabeled tape, you aren't just finding a movie. You're finding a piece of someone's life. Maybe it's a stranger. Maybe it's someone who's been dead for 30 years. And maybe they left something there, on purpose. This is the heart of analog horror explained. Why old VHS tapes are so terrifying. The medium itself is the scare. A home video can shift into a cursed recording without warning. Imagine you're watching grainy footage of a family picnic, laughter echoing faintly, children running barefoot across the grass. Then, without any cut, without any transition, the camera shifts. Now it's recording the inside of a basement. Dark concrete walls, dripping pipes, the sound of water echoing. No one's holding the camera. It moves on its own, slowly, shakily, as though someone or something is crawling just behind it. You want to pause? You want to stop? But VHS doesn't pause like digital. The screen stutters, the tracking line swims, and when it clears, the basement door is open, and you swear you hear breathing, not from the tape, but from behind your own wall. VHS horror becomes terrifying because it doesn't just show you something scary. It makes you believe you've invited it inside. Every time the tape rolls, every time the static screams across the screen, there's a dread that grows heavier. Analog horror explained. Why old VHS tapes are so terrifying comes down to our primal fear of losing control. When you stream a video, You can skip, pause, exit. But with VHS, the tape owns you. The rewind whines like an animal in pain. The fast-forward screeches. And if you try to eject it, sometimes the machine refuses. The tape snarls, stretches, tangles. And in that moment, you feel trapped. There's a reason horror creators choose VHS aesthetics over digital. Because deep down, people remember sitting alone in a dark room, the hum of a TV screen burning their eyes, the sound of tapes spinning like teeth grinding in the dark. That moment when static fills the room isn't just a glitch. It's a doorway, a liminal space between sound and silence, light and darkness, memory and nightmare. And when you stare too long, when you focus on the fuzz and the noise, you start to see faces forming, faint outlines, mouths opening, eyes blinking. The longer you stare, the less sure you are that they're glitches. They look aware, as though someone or something knows you're watching. VHS horror is terrifying because it makes the familiar unsafe. It hijacks the machines we trusted and turns them into portals. And this is the true nightmare. The final revelation, Analog Horror explained. Why old VHS tapes are so terrifying is not just about broken images or warped sound. It's about what lives between the static. Every tape is a doorway to a forgotten memory, and sometimes memory is not just memory, it's a message, a warning, or an invitation. What if the static itself is alive? What if the flickering lines and hissing noise are not just random signals, but a language we're not meant to understand? Think about it when you stare into the noise long enough. It stars back. Every glitch could be a code. Every distortion could be a whisper from something that recorded itself long before you were born. And the more you watch, the more you risk becoming part of it. That's why VHS tapes terrify across all cultures, all ages. Because no matter where you are in the world, you know what it feels like to lose control, to watch something you can't explain, to feel the pull of something that shouldn't exist. And here's the warning. Once you've seen the static, once you've heard the whispers inside the hiss, you can't unhear them. Tonight, when you shut off your screen, when the room goes dark, listen closely. Do you hear it? The faint click of a tape sliding into a machine. If you do, it's already too late. You've pressed play, and it doesn't stop for you. It never stops. It only and if you dare, don't just walk away from this nightmare. Step deeper. The next tape is waiting, and it's already spinning in the dark.